Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to talk about how Pokemon ruin Magic the Gathering. No, that is not a clickbait title. There's a lot of truth to that, and I'm going to break it down in this video, starting with a nice little history lesson. We're going to go back to the beginning of Magic, now 30 years ago in 1993, back when Netscape Navigator was the #1 search engine. Things were a lot more low-key. You didn't have a panel with the CEO, CFO telling you if you don't like the new product, don't buy it. None of that was happening. It was a very understated, dedicated fan base, a niche within a niche. It was so bare bones, like the original sets, they just gave them the test names. You know, like when you make a new website or a new game, it's like, okay, this is the alpha round of the beta testing. It's like, yeah, we'll just use that as the name of the set. So that's how low key it was back then. And then in my peripheral experience of Magic, it incrementally grew, and then something really happened in 1999. Pokemon cards. WotC was holding the bag to print Pokemon cards in 1999, and they had no idea how valuable that bag was. My favorite stat to really capture the explosivity of the 90s is in 1999, multiple sports sets just didn't get a release. Like football, basketball, hockey, soccer, baseball, just wholesale did not get a 1999 set because all the printers were full of Pokemon cards. So with that meteoric rise in Pokemon, naturally, WotC holding that bag, the value of WotC increased as well. And now, according to Wizards of the Coast employees at the time, what happened in 1999 is because that value went so high, a lot of people were like, you know what? I'm going to cash out my shares. And because WotC didn't have the funds to pay all these people who wanted to cash out, they had to go look for an acquisition. And you see where this is going. This was the big motivator for them to seek an acquisition with Hasbro, for Daddy Hasbro to come in and say, oh yeah, we'll definitely fund you guys. We'll definitely acquire you guys. So at the end of the day, Pikachu and Charizard are a big reason, if not the main reason, for why WotC had to sell to Hasbro. So there's a little quick history lesson. Now, one thing I want to talk about here, a little mini video in a video, is a little philosophy of the necessary other, because a lot of people like me romanticize the WotC era. I'm sure a lot of you guys do too. And we'd always say, like, you know, what if? What if Pokemon was still owned by WotC? And I think that's an interesting discussion, because now we can see what would happen with that timeline, where we got the nice happy path of the Nintendo timeline. But the thing I wanted to talk about here with the necessary other, it's kind of like in Titanic with the iceberg. That's the necessary other. That's what makes like Kate and Jack's relationship so romantic. Because if it didn't happen and they ended up hitting their destination, would it have been as romantic? Would these people from two completely different backgrounds end up being together happily ever after? The bottom line is that really freezes it in time. It just completely, literally and figuratively solidifies that romance. And kind of like for the nostalgia original gen boomers like me, we love the WotC era because partly it ended. That necessary other of the acquisition of WotC, you know, selling to Nintendo, is truly like a game changer, I think, for Pokemon and why we are better off today. Now, with that said, with my little mini Corsair philosophy, it's not just Hasbro's fault here. That's something I wanted to talk about in the video, is that yes, Hasbro is like the Magic is like the lure of the pit right now. Like they're milking that golden goose to death for sure. But it's not just Hasbro's fault. And why I'm saying that is because Nintendo pumps out constant merchandise for Pokemon, constant TCG product, constant video games. You probably see where I'm going here. Magic really doesn't do that. Magic is a one-trick pony, a very valuable stallion, but nonetheless a one-trick pony. They are very good at doing one thing very well. It's a linear IP, and I'm not knocking that. I mean, you can see I'm the rare bird here who collects this stuff. I just love the art and history, but the reality is, like, let's keep it real. Magic is all about playability and maybe slightly investability. That's pretty much it. And it's one of those things that, when we said earlier, 1993, dedicated fan base, you gotta really like Magic. Like, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I think Pikachu's cute. You can't just be like, yeah, I think like Sarah Angel's cute. Like, you really gotta like Magic. So there's a higher barrier to entry on top of it being linear. And I want to talk about this because there really isn't anything to soften the blow. You know, I see a lot of people dogpiling on Hasbro, which I'm in there too. I'm dumpster diving right on top because it's frustrating to see a company just milk, you know, an IP into the ground. But the problem with Magic is there's nothing really to soften the blow. There is no merch, you know, even within just Pokemon cards alone, you have so much of a range. Like Pokemon cards have playability, and within that playability umbrella, which Magic has this too, you know, the vintage and all that stuff. But then you have this collectability side. You know, there's people who just want to get like a certain species. Like, you name every Pokemon, everyone, somebody's collecting it. Actually, I think Pokemon did a survey about that, and only 5 species were they couldn't find anyone that wanted to collect them. One of them was like the lamprey one and Pat Rat. It's like, of course, but that's an insane ratio. You know, I saw a TikTok the other day, a guy's collecting Nose Pass and has all, he's like, yeah, when you collect a non-popular Pokemon, this is the only merch they have, but the bottom line is you have a species collector for every type of Pokemon. You have card type collectors, people go after certain eras, people go after like certain languages, certain releases, gold stars, art academies, promos, first edition, you name it. Someone's collecting it in Pokemon. Different language collectors, or just in general, collectors. You don't really see that in Magic. And again, not trying to take a shot here because I'm the weirdo who loves collecting Magic. When I look at this stuff, I see that 90s feeling, inspirational art that I grew up with. Like that background there on the Mox, pure 90s. All of this, like even the font, even how it's structured, even the layout, even the little CGI, the technology at the time, you know, I love all that. I can't get enough of it, but I'm not normal. Most people Magic are not doing that. Outside of, I would even say, right after you get out of the dark. No, right after the dark, it's dark. There's nothing going on there after that. You know, people are not really collecting it. You could cherry pick like certain cards that, again, are playable because that's what the roots are here for Magic, but again, collectors just not think. It's just like, I'm out here, I do so many hobbies. I've been doing so many hobbies forever. To my last breath, I'll always be a collector. From day one to the last day, it's always going to be a collecting world for me. And I can feel the like absence of collectors in Magic. So why I'm saying all this again is because there's nothing to soften the blow with Magic. You know, there's just not a way to say, let's just do a whole plush line of like all these characters, because it's hard when your characters are too hardcore. Like Lord of the Pit back here pretty much is like clearly he's a resident of like whatever of the underworld. Don't want to get demonetized for saying the real name. Like this card is called Armageddon. Like this dude right here, I think this card's even banned. Isn't this guy like alter now? Is he balanced? Like the bottom line is like Magic is a very, very hardcore IP that does a very hardcore thing very well. But the problem is, I've said this even in my older videos, they're all eggs in one basket. You know, you don't have the ability to really do things like merch, clothes, plushes, figures, all this stuff. And, you know, I'd be curious to see if there would be any interest. Maybe some of these characters could get some, you know, type of fan appeal, but it's yet to happen. When you go look at why Pokemon is one of the highest grossing media, or the literal highest grossing media franchise, I feel like I say it too many times, it's because they do all this stuff. You know, they have so many plushes, and within that umbrella, you have like very serious people who collect plushes and can tell you the breakdown like Diz on this one. They only do the certain eyes from this era. Like each category in Pokemon has like a whole ecosystem where, again, Magic does one thing very, very well. It's a stallion for playability. It's the gold standard for TCGs. I don't think that's ever going to change. I mean, it's the most complicated, like immersive, most difficult, dynamic trading card game out there, but that's really it. You know, that's what it's all about. So that is why, at the end of the day, not only did Pokemon ruin Magic's Gathering, but also not just the Hasbro acquisition, they didn't really grow in the way Pokemon did. And again, I'm not trying to do this to like pump Pokemon's tires, because I like both of these. I like collecting both of them. It's just that Pokemon really is the blueprint. You know, there's more people who had an experience with it, where Magic, again, it's really tough. Like back in the day, in the 90s especially, like it's a full-time deal really to be a competitive player. Like you got to dedicate a lot of time. I have a lot of family and friends who play Magic, and it's a full thing. Like it's a very rewarding and engaging hobby, but there's a lot of dedication involved. There's a higher learning curve. So it's harder to have like a Pokemon Go, Magic Go experience. You know what I mean? Like you can't just like casually do it. You got to really be in it. So it's more difficult to create broad experiences with a linear game. You know, that's the TLDR here. Now, ultimately with that said, I think Magic's going to be fine. I know as someone who's been watching Rudy and sees his like, you know, 57th video on how much he hates Hasbro, you know, I agree. I don't like to see how a company of massive corporations is milking an IP, you know, that has the most organic interest. But yeah, it's difficult to create a broad experience with a linear game. So it's not only because Pokemon, you know, forced the hand of WotC back in the day to Hasbro, it's also because Magic really just didn't branch out from that. It's like an oak tree with no branches, you know, it's got this great solid thing going, but give me some plushes, like give me some shirts, give me something, you know, there. Because I think if you had a broader experience, it would help out a lot. And I think it would cool the jets. A lot of people were frustrated because it'd make more sense. It's like, okay, in Pokemon, like you can just completely not do modern and still enjoy the hobby. You completely not do WotC, completely not do the EX era. You can really just pick out a corner of things and have a good time. So I feel like Magic really needs a bit of that. And I don't think it's too late because I think Magic's going to be fine ultimately. You know, outside of all the videos that I agree, you know, Hasbro sucks. That's the TLDR here for what they're doing. But I think ultimately Magic's gonna be fine, and it would be cool to see them try and broaden that. Try to like, I don't know how you incentivize people to look at cards and value them because I do it naturally. So I don't know how to say, hey, this is why I like it. You know, I think there's an opportunity here. But yeah, that's my take on it. I felt like that was a nice history lesson there to share with you guys because I've touched on E4 a couple times, but I'm sure most people who aren't deep into the Mewtwo Grandma Cave, you know, aren't aware that that's really a big reason why, if not the reason, why WotC was acquired by Hasbro is because of the Pokemon boom in 1999. You know, a lot of people wanted to sell their shares. WotC didn't have the funds. They had to go get it from someone else. And the rest is history. So there it is, guys. As usual, hopefully I captured all this and gave you something to think about. And you know the deal. Let me know how you feel. That's pretty much it, guys. Till next time.